Fine. So recording has been started. So let's start with this stress testing. So auditor has to understand how the computer system or the information technology uh, helps the banking business to carry out their operations. So understand about it. What are the basic consideration into it? The most important under the CSI environment is the rights, duties, and power. How it is defined for the number of members under the system. That is very important, and how they can function. And then stress testing. Whatever the parameters which is set under the software, you have to test that it is as per the Banking Regulations Act, and it gives the true and fair view, right? So that is the stress testing. RBI has required that all the commercial banks, excluding the rural regional banks, shall put in place a board approved stress testing framework to suit their individual requirement, which would be integrated into their risk management system. So as per the RBI guidelines, it is required that the whatever the software or whatever the information technology software which is used by the banking companies for their operations, there should be a stress testing framework. Means when a particular transaction should be denied. So if you go to the example which you are familiar with, it is that suppose if you go to an ATM machines, right, and if you have your valid debit card in your hands, and when you try to withdraw through your debit card and you enter a 3 times the password wrong, uh, immediately your account will be blocked for a 1 day. So it will become deactivated for the generally it is for the 24 hours. So वो एक दिन के लिए बंद हो जाएगा. That is nothing but the trust testing framework. So if someone lose his debit card and some other person is possession of a debit card and he's try to withdraw the money and he enter a 3 times the wrong passwords, right? That account will becomes deactivated. So that is to be known as a stress testing framework. So that is mandatory on the part. There are so many transactions. I am just talking about the simple transaction. On 1 day in classroom, I give you one example that I generally buying from my credit card a certain amount of money, around 3,000 or 5,000 rupees. But all of a sudden, on 1 day, I use that credit card for the purchase of a laptop, which is available in online at a price of 59,000 or 60,000 rupees. And when I enter into that transaction, it immediately denied because in that particular credit card there was never a transaction of rupees more than 50,000, a single transaction of rupees more than 50,000. So at that moment the system will not allow. So that is to be treated as the stress testing framework. So that should be in place, that the auditor has to take into consideration. Stress tests are designed to understand whether the bank has enough capital to survive the possible adverse economic conditions and to maintain the enough buffer to stay afloat under the extreme scenarios. So ये तो मैंने the example which I give you is for from the customer's point of view and from the banking transactions. But at the same moment of capital adequacy ratio, SLR ratio, so there are parameters set. So if that SLR or capital adequacy ratio goes below the as prescribed by the RBI, then the testing framework will work into that. So that will, so that will give you the enough capital, means capital adequacy ratio, or maintain a buffer stay afloat. Is it clear, बच्चों? समझ में आ रहा है?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Then
Yes,
Basel III framework. This is absolutely important nowadays. All over the world, uh, there is an international monetary funds, and there is an international practices how a different banks can carry out their transactions. So there are prescribed rules and regulations under which a particular bank has to function. So that is to be treated as Basel 1, Basel 2, Basel 3. Nowadays, Basel 4 are also there. And RBI, in case of some of the banking, this framework is also applicable. And it is mandatory to comply. So these are the standard operating procedures, which is adopted by the banks, which is prescribed by the Basel 3. So nowadays, not only Basel 3, but Basel 4 is also implemented. And these are the, what is Basel? You just understand it. Basel norms relate to the capital adequacy requirement compliances which the bank has to achieve as contained in the Basel 3 Accord. Basel Accord 3 में लिखा हुआ है कि हर एक बैंक को इतना capital adequacy ratio maintain करना पड़ेगा, वो करना पड़ेगा. Right? So what is that? Basel 3, if you look at to the last point, Basel 3 Accord aims at. Basel 3 actually, why it is created and what kind of framework it is. Right? All of you know that there is a financial reporting framework, which is required to be, the financial statement are prepared in a compliance with the financial reporting framework. Same way, this Basel framework is for the banks to maintain the capital adequacy ratio. So that what is, and that is acceptable all over the world. So Basel 3 Accord aims at improving the banking sector's ability to absorb the shocks arising from financial and economic stress, irrespective of the reasons thereof. Right? So improve the banking sector's ability to absorb the shock means agar generally the main threats to the bank and the operation of the bank is whatever the advances they have given to their borrowers, or the people who are in need of money, if they fail to repay, so if the advances or the loan which is sanctioned by the bank becomes NPA, that is the biggest shock. So Basel 3 will prescribe the rules and regulations, and which will improve the banking sector's ability to absorb the shocks arising from the financial or economic stress, irrespective of the reasons thereof. Improving the risk management and governance practices, how they can do the business effectively and efficiently, and strengthening the bank's transparency and disclosure standards. So कौन सी बैंकिंग के ट्रांजैक्शन है उसको किस तरीके से ज्यादा ट्रांसपेरेंट किया जाए और उसके अंदर कैसे ज्यादा से ज्यादा इंफॉर्मेशन को incorporate किया जाए which is useful for the users of the financial statement. So disclosure standards, it will determine that. Now come to the point number 2. Basel capital adequacy norms are meant for the protection of the depositors. So the people who have put their deposit with the bank, so that it will, these norms will protect the depositors and shareholders by perspective rules for measuring the capital adequacy, thereby evolving methods of determining the regulatory capital and ensuring the efficient use of capital. Basel 3 Accord strengthen the regulations, supervisions, and risk management of the banking sector. It is a globally regulatory standards on capital adequacy of the banks, stress testing, as well as the market liquidity risk. So Basel is not only applicable in India, but it is applicable mostly in most of the countries. All right. So it is good to learn that. It itself is one of the course. Huh? So those students who are or the students of the banking and insurance in the department who got the MCOM admission, they may be learning our entire paper on the Basel one, or Basel itself is a one paper. You can say it something like the advanced auditing is a subject. So Basel 1, 2, 3. Nowadays it is 4. Right. So the Basel 4 is more stringent to comply with. But if the bank is able to comply with the Basel 4 framework, then it would be to be treated as a good banking companies, right? So that is all about. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Fine. Let's start with the point number next, right? That is the internal control procedure in a bank. So general controls. What are the general controls? Then the controls related to cash, then constituent ledgers, bills for collection, bills for purchase, loans and advances, and so on, demand draft and interbank deposit and credit card operations. So what kind of internal procedure should be there for particular transaction, right? So it's easy to understand. So the general controls in the case of the banks are: the staff and officer of the bank should be shifted from one position to another frequently and without the prior notice. And that's the reason the banking jobs are transferable jobs. So one branch से दूसरी branch में उसको transfer किया जाता है और same branch में उनके portfolio को time to time change किया जाता है. So, and that should be, if it is there, you can say it is a good internal control procedure in a bank. The work of one person should be checked by the another person, means internal check should be there. A responsible officer should be given a possession of the demand draft and checkbooks which are not used. If there are unused draft and unused checkbook, it should be in the possession of the responsible officer who has to maintain the record of it. And whenever they are issuing, it should maintain the records of the issue as well. The signature book should be kept with the responsible officials. So signature book, it should be in safe custody of the responsible officer. The bank should take insurance policy against the loss or the employee's infidelity. So bank has to take the insurance policy for all depositor. There should be an insurance of 5 lakh of rupees, which is mandatory as per the RBI guidelines. So that should be taken against all. Also, if for the employees, if it is required, it should be taken. The management structure should be clearly drawn, and the rights and duty should be properly understood. So what is the rights and responsibilities and duties and powers of the management, and what is the structure of management should be clearly defined. Now, internal control procedure related to the case. So this is general and this is now related to case, because under the banking operations, case is a sensitive items because there are huge amount of cases used on a day-to-day basis under the banking operations. So case should be kept in the joint custody of at least 2 responsible officers. So one key of the case box is with the cashier, and another book is for the senior, and the responsibilities of both of maintaining the physical case. Surprise checking should be conducted. So surprise check means whenever there is an official who is verifying the case, he should verify on a random basis without a prior notice to the cashiers. The cashier should not have access to the customer's ledger account and the day book. So the cashier is only handling the case. He is not aware of which customer have how much balance in their bank account. So he does not have the access to the ledger account. And it should not be. अगर वो नहीं है, अगर ऐसा उसके पास इसका access है, then the internal control procedure is not appropriate in the banking environment. Payment should be made only after the vouchers have been passed by a proper officer. So there should be an adequate authorization by the responsible officers. Receipts and payment scrolls, memorandum book maintained by the cashier should be compared with the case columns of the day book by the independent persons. If it is in a manual books of account, but nowadays there is no manual books of accounts. So whatever the case is accepted, it should be entered into the system of a particular day when it is received, and whenever the payment is made, it should be paid through the system. So the system will give the and there should be an approval of the other responsible officer in the system. The limit on the payment power of the tailor should be laid down. So कैशियर के पास कितने पेमेंट लिमिट के पेमेंट का पावर है वो शुड बी लेट डाउन होना चाहिए. दिस इज अ सिंपल इलस्ट्रेटिव लिस्ट. देयर आर नंबर ऑफ अदर्स surprise checks, right? So there may be, if you look into the case, if I want to add, I can add that there should be every day the record of case at the end of the day, how much the opening case is there, what is the receipt, what is the payment, and what is the closing balance, and what is the denomination. There is a one document which is prepared, and it should be kept in record. Okay, this is what is the denomination of the case of the closing case every day. And that record is maintained for all the 365 days, or maybe for the whatever the number of working days in a calendar year is there, or any financial year is there. Then constituents ledger. Before making the payment, check should be, checked in respect of the signature, date, balance on hands, and should be passed by the proper officer. No withdrawal should be normally allowed against the clearing checks deposited on the same day. Ledger keeper should not have access to the voucher summary sheets. The interest debited or credited to the constituents account should be independently checked. So constituent ledger means the person who is making the payment through checks. Right? So whenever he is making the payment check, the signature, date, and balance in hand should be checked, and then only the responsible officer or a proper officer should pass that particular check. Right? So this all should be checked, and that should be an appropriate internal control system with regard to the constituent ledgers. Then what is the internal control system for bills for collection? All documents accompanying the bill should be received and entered in the cashier in the registered by the proper officer. So jitne bhi all documents accompanying the bill, it should be duly entered into the register. The accounts of the principal should be created only after the realization of the bill. So after the bill actually realized, then only the principal ledger account should be credited. Until that, it should be shown as an outstanding. It should be ensured that the bill sent by one branch to another branch for collections are not included twice in the amalgamated balance sheets. So if there is a transfer from one branch to another branch, means actually it is of the company. So it should, when it is amalgamated, it should not be included twice because it is only one transaction. Bill purchase. At the time of purchase of the bill, an officer should verify that all the document of titles, title means the ownership, are properly assigned to the bank, means bank is the fully owner of the discounted bills. Bills purchase means the bills which is discounted with the bank. Then sufficient margin should be kept while purchasing or discounting of the bill. So that margin should be sufficient, and that is as per the rules or regulation which is set by the boards of the bank. So board of directors of the bank ने जो भी rules और regulation बनाए हैं कि what should be the margin, accordingly the margin should be maintained. Or irregular outstanding account should be periodically reported to the head office. So if there is any particular bill which is due and has not been paid, or so that is also to be informed along with those who are outstanding. But so we have purchased the bill, but it is not due because the due date is coming after, will come into the future date. But that should be periodically reported to the head office. In case of purchase or discounting of bill, proportionate income should be recognized between the period. So when we discounted bill, suppose the bill is discounted in the month of February and bill is going to mature in the month of suppose May. So the period is for 3 months, February, March, April, or May. In the month of May, it will become matured. But so if it is discounted on in the month of February, then for February and March, when the financial year gets over on 31st of March, you have to recognize the income. And it should be the proportionate income because the actual income you will receive when the bills mature. But the proportionate income should be recognized in the books of accounts. And that should be the system of recognizing the interest. Loans and advances. This is the most important activity which is carried out by the banks. So what should be the internal control system into that? Advances should be made only after evaluating if you have a physical copy, underline it, evaluating the creditworthiness of the borrower and obtaining a sanction from the proper authorities of the bank. So those who are in the charge of giving authorization under the banks, they should authorize it, and before giving any advances to anyone, his, her, or its creditworthiness should be duly taken into consideration. All loan documents like promissory note, letter of hypothecation, guarantee letter, etc., should be executed by the parties before the advances are made. So that is also to be taken into consideration. While determining the loan amount to be sanctioned, sufficient margin should be kept against the securities taken so as to cover any decline in the value thereof and also to comply with the RBI directives. So that is very, very important. Security should be received and returned by the responsible officer and should be kept in the joint custody of at least two responsible officers. So it is very, very important whenever the banks provides any advances to anyone, there should be a sufficient security should be in possession of the banks, uh, right? And it should be, the kept in joint custody of at least two responsible officers so that cannot be manipulated or misappropriated the assets or security. Securities requiring registration should be registered in the name of the bank. So if it is hypothecated, it should be hypothecated in the name of the bank. So if the borrower defaults in repayment of interest or principal amount, if the bank has become the legal owner of it, then for bank it is easy to liquidate that assets and recover the money which is outstanding from the borrower. In case of physical possession of the goods as a security, the goods should be test checked at the time of receipts. In case of hypothecated goods not in possession of the bank, surprise check should be made. So the surprise checking should be done of the stock. Personal inquiry should be made so as to determine the market value of the goods. So agar goods is hypothecated with the banks, then there should be a personal inquiry as to the determination of their market value, because based on which the working capital loan or a term loan is given by the bank. For any decrease or increase in the value of security, drawing power should be adjusted and all the accounts should be kept within both the drawing powers and the sanction limit at all the times. So the security, the value of the security plays an important role because it is a security if the borrower default. So if there is an increase or decrease in the value of the security, then obviously the amount which is sanctioned towards the loan will also increase or decrease accordingly. All irregular accounts should be brought to the notice of the head office on a regular basis. So इरेगुलर अकाउंट है जहाँ पे एडवांसेस होता है, टाइम टू टाइम पैसा आता नहीं है या एक साथ आ जाता है या बहुत लंबे समय तक नहीं आता है. So this is all to be treated as a irregular accounts and it should be brought to the notice of the head office. The operation in each advance should be reviewed at least once in every year. So all advances जो भी किया गया है in case of cash advances, it should be reviewed thoroughly. There should be exist a proper system for the post disbursement supervision and follow-up. So if the once the advance is granted or given to the borrower, then there should be a proper system of supervision and follow-up so that you can understand that whatever the loans and advances you have given is recoverable with interest. Classification of advances should be made as per the RBI guidelines. So whenever the advance is given, whether it is good, bad, doubtful, or lost, that what is so standard, substandard, right? So that classification should be done as per the RBI guidelines. Ensure that the funds disbursed should be utilized only for the purpose for which the advance has been granted. तो जिसके लिए दिया गया है उसी के लिए वो fund utilized हुआ है. Demand draft. Signature nowadays, actually the business of demand draft is gone nowadays because nowadays it is the online payment, either Google Pay or Paytm or Phone Pay or something like the facilities available. The signature on the demand draft should be checked by the officers with the signature book. All the demand draft issued by the branch should be immediately confirmed by the advances to the paying branch. If the paying branch does not receive the proper confirmation of any demand draft from the issuing bank, or does not receive the credit in its account with that branch, it should take immediate steps to ascertain the reasons. सो जनरली डिमांड ड्राफ्ट पेपर होता है तो एक बैंक इश्यू करती है और दूसरी बैंक के अकाउंट में वो पैसे डालती है जिसको ड्राफ्ट दिया जाता है. जैसे कि आज की तारीख में तो बहुत ड्राफ्ट कम इश्यू होते हैं, लेकिन सपोज कि इफ आई एम अप्लाइंग फॉर द इंडियन आर्मी और इंडियन आर्मी बोलती है कि अगर आपको हमारे यहाँ पे अप्लाई करने के लिए 1000 रुपीज की फीस भरनी पड़ेगी, जिसके लिए आपको डीडी बनाना पड़ेगा, डिमांड ड्राफ्ट बनाना पड़ेगा. तो मैं बैंक के पास जाता हूँ, डिमांड ड्राफ्ट बनवाता हूँ और वो मुझे बोलेगा कि किसके फेवर में. तो इंडियन आर्मी है, उनका जो बैंक अकाउंट होगा जिस भी बैंक ब्रांच में उसका नाम लिखा होगा, तो मुझे उस फेवर में डिमांड ड्राफ्ट बनाना पड़ेगा. और जब मैं अपनी लोकल बैंक में जाके ड्राफ्ट कटवाऊंगा, तो जिसके फेवर का ड्राफ्ट कटवाऊंगा तो ये बैंक है, उसके बैंक अकाउंट में जाएगा पैसा, राइट. सो दैट इज टू बी ascertained that what is mentioned over here. Inter branch accounts, the branch should be adjusted only on the basis of advices, not on the strength of the entries found in the statement of accounts received from the other branches. The promote action should be taken preferably by the central authority if any entry are not responded to by any branch within a reasonable time, right. So that is what is all about. Credit card operation, nowadays this is gaining more and more important, credit card operations. So there should be an effective screening of applications with a reasonable good credit assessment. So nowadays it is a CIBIL score which is taken into consideration. So if you apply for a credit card, generally the bank, before issuing the credit card, they will look into the CIBIL score of the customer. So if in past the applicant has not defaulted in any of the payments, their credit score would be good. So they will test the credit, good credit assessment, and then only sanction the credit card. There should be a strict control over the storage and issue of card because it's very sensitive. So it should be a proper lock and key. There should be a system whereby a merchant confirms that the status of unutilized limit of the credit card holder from the bank before accepting the settlement in case the amount to be settled exceeds the specified percentage of the total limit of the card holder. Generally, आज की तारीख पे ऐसा होता नहीं है, but whenever the credit card is issued based on the income which is earned by the particular person who has applied for the credit card, the limit will be sanctioned. So that the card holder has to work within that particular limit. But here in case of banking internal control, as far internal controls, that limit has been duly decided based on the rules and regulations determined by the governing body. There should be a system of promote reporting by the merchants of all the settlements accepted by them through the credit cards. So when any individual is using the credit card and buying through a credit card, so जिसको भी payment किया होगा उसके account में वो पैसा जाएगा, and it should be duly reconciled with the merchant for all the payments which is done through the credit card. Reimbursement to the merchant should be made only after the verification of the validity of the merchant's acceptance of the cards. So obviously nowadays everything is done to the system. So what will happen? Yes, any questions?
No, sir.
Okay. So nowadays, what will happen? Suppose if you go to the a particular store where they are accepting the money through the credit card, so all the customer will come and swipe the credit card. And when the entire day gets over, there is one report is generated from that POS machine from where the credit card has been swapped. तो पूरे दिन के अंदर कितने लोगों ने क्रेडिट कार्ड से पेमेंट किया है उसका एक रिपोर्ट जनरेट हो जाएगा, and that report will automatically go to the bank's account, और बैंक अकाउंट में जाएगा और बैंक अकाउंट दे विल कोऑर्डिनेट विद द बैंक. तो जिसके पास जिसका भी क्रेडिट कार्ड होगा उसके पास से वो पैसा मर्चेंट को मिल जाएगा. सो दैट शुड बी सेटल, वो सेटल हो जाना चाहिए. There should be a system to ensure that the statements are sent regularly and promptly to the customer. जो भी customer के पास credit card है, उसको time to time statement जाना चाहिए, promptly देना चाहिए, उसको reminder भी देना चाहिए. There should be a system of monitor and follow of the customer's payment. The items overdue beyond a reasonable period should be identified and attended to carefully. Credit should be stopped as early as possible to avoid the increased losses. अगर कोई क्रेडिट कार्ड है, उसका पेमेंट ड्यू हो चुका है और वो अगर पेमेंट नहीं कर रहा है और वो क्रेडिट कार्ड पे खरीदी करते ही जा रहा है, so if there is a default on the part of the customer, then it should be stopped or it should be blocked as early as possible to avoid the increased losses. There should be a system of periodical review of the customer credit card holder's account. On this basis, the limit of the customers may be revised if necessary. The review should also include the determination of the doubtful amounts and the provisioning in respect thereof. So, agar kisi at any moment of time, if it is comes to the knowledge of the bank that whatever the credit card they've issued and some of the credit card holder will not be able to repay because of the any financial constraint they have because of any of the reasons. So in that circumstances, if it is provisioning is required, it should be done. If it is doubtful, recorded as a doubtful, then it should be recorded as a doubtful. So this is what is the internal control procedure in case of banks. Any questions any one of you have?
No, sir.
Okay. Now whatever we have learned, it is again repetitive in nature. So this is again talking about the returns to be filed by the banking companies. So वो हमने already पढ़ा था कि कौन-कौन से reports और statements होते हैं. So now onwards, it's most of the things are repetitive in nature, right? So these are the scope of assignment. तो यहाँ पे जो लिखा है that will again come. So in my view, if there is an equation from this topic of banking, it should be written from the first page to. So how many questions are there? One is the legal framework, which is very difficult to understand and digest. So very remote chances of asking this type of a question, that what is the legal and regulatory framework. All right. Contents of audit report may be asked. So you can have to write for the conducting of a bank audit is a good question because there are a number of steps. So this is the questions can be asked, and this is what is important. And the internal control procedure in the banks. So this could be of a 15 marks. So you can, so this is repetitive in nature. वो यहाँ से repeat हो रहा है, right? So let's go quickly with this, and this is very simple understanding. Return to be filed, apart from the weekly return to be filed by the scheduled bank, all the banking companies are required to file the number of returns with the Reserve Bank of India. Some of the returns so filed as given. So it is not all the list, but some of the list which is required to be filed. Monthly return of the assets maintained in India in accordance with Section 24, and the demand and time deposit in India at the close of the business of each alternate Friday during the month. So that what is the return to be filed by the banking companies with the RBI. Quarterly return of assets and liability in India at the close of the business on the last Friday of every quarter. ये statement भी file करना है. Annual return of unclosed account which have not been operated upon for 10 years or more. So if there are any accounts which is not operated in the last 10 years, so that is also to be, that report on that should be forwarded to the RBI. Monthly return of assets and liability in India at the close of the business on the last day of the Friday of every month. Then quarterly return of the offices, means the branches in India. Half-yearly status report on compliance with all the instruction and directive issued by the Reserve Bank of India on the various matters. So in last half year, whatever the guidelines is issued by the RBI, whether it is duly complied with or not, that should be the report on it. And any other statement or information as may be required by the Reserve Bank, foreign currency position statement, list of advances against shares and debenture of rupees 1 lakh and above, the cases of fraud and forgery, etc. So this old report, this is again some of the list, some of the returns. There are other returns are also there. Then audit. What is the audit? A bank is required to get the accounts audited. Section 30 of the Banking Regulations Act 1949 deals with the audit of the accounts of the banking company as well as the nationalized bank. The balance sheet and profit or loss account of the banking company and the nationalized bank should be audited by a person duly qualified to be auditor of the company. The auditor of the banking company is appointed at the annual general meeting. ये हम सब आगे पढ़ चुके हैं. If you look at to that on the first page, it is already there. Am I right? So this is all duly qualified persons, section 30, subsection 1, AGM, the auditor of the company will be appointed. So it is repetitive in nature, right? So I am not going to discuss too much, but I would prefer you, if the question is asked in examination, you write from the here. It is more better to write from here rather than on the which is given over here. So it is repetitive in nature. So बहुत सारे बच्चे मुझे क्वेश्चन पूछ रहे थे, सर बहुत બધું मटेरियल છે, આટલું બધું કેવી રીતે વાંચાય? It is repetitive in nature. So either of it you can write, and if they ask in examination you can write it, right? So दोनों पढ़ने की जरूरत नहीं है. हाँ, एक बार पढ़ लो, समझ में आ जाए, उसके बाद एग्जाम में कोई एक ही लिखो. Fine. And concerned through the board of directors. However, in both the cases, the approval Reserve Bank of India is must before the appointment is made. So I am not reading this, right? The auditor in case of Nationalized Bank will submit his audit report to the central government, the President of India, with the copy to RBI and the bank concerned. So SBI के केस के अंदर वो सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट को भी जाता है, मीन्स सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट में प्रेसिडेंट ऑफ इंडिया को जाता है with RBI on hand. The legislation relevant to the banking ऑडिट ऑफ द बैंक. सो कौन कौन से ऐसे लॉ है जो एप्लीकेबल है, सो वो भी हम पढ़ चुके हैं. सो आई एम नॉट रीडिंग दिस, सिंपल है. सो दिस ऑल आर द लॉज आर एप्लीकेबल. दैट the main act is the Banking Regulations Act 1949, and then there are other acts, like if it is a company, the Companies Act 1956 or Companies Act 2013. So if the bank is constituted before 2013, then it has been constituted as per the Companies Act 1956. Or if it is after 2013, it's been constituted as per the Companies Act 2013. Then Banking Companies Acquisition and Transfer of Undertaking Act 1970, right? Then Banking Company Acquisition Transfer Undertaking Act, then Banking Regulation Acts, and there are a number of other acts which are applicable. Then banking in EDP environment. So it is given under the CSI environment, and the same way it is given over here under the EDP environment. So electronic data processing. So earlier it was to be treated as electronic data processing environment. Nowadays it is treated as under the CSI environment, computerized information system. So both are one and the same things, but still whatever is mentioned over here, rather than it is betterly given over here. So these are the more important point, special consideration in CSI environment. So I would prefer that you write like this in the exam rather than which is given at the back. I hope I am clear to all of you. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
Right? Yes.
Then conduct of the bank audits. So the objective of the bank audit, right? So again, it is repetitive in nature. According to the section 30, subsection 1 of the Act, the balance sheet and profit or loss account of the banking company as well as the national bank are required to be audited by the persons duly qualified to be an auditor of the company. Right? So obviously, वही audit कर सकता है. Right? The objective of the audit of the financial statements, the balance sheets, profit or loss account prepared within the framework of recognized accounting policy and practices and the relevant statutory requirements, if any, is enable an auditor to express an expert opinion on such financial statement, that whether the financial statement reflecting the true and fair view or not. Similarly, in case of the bank's primary objective is to report on whether the presented by the balance sheet, the view presented by the balance sheet and profit or loss account, besides The auditor is also required to report on certain other matters specified in the relevant statutes, such as Banking Regulations Act, the Companies Act, and apart from expressing his independent opinion on the financial statement, the auditor of the bank is also required to submit the long form audit report, LFR. So that is what is to be provided. Audit approach, what should be the audit approach in case of bank audit? In a bank audit, the statutory auditor do not conduct post and vouch audit. Bank audit is sometimes referred to as a balance sheet audit, system audit, and mostly an audit of advances. So generally, it will refer to the balance sheet items, means where the capital adequacy ratio and SLR ratios are mentioned, which is more important. So the balance sheet audit, system audit, how the computerized system or information technology system is used by the bank for their banking operations, and mostly in the advance of auditing, because the main business or main revenue the banks are earning from the advances. It does not mean that the bank audit is confined to these items only. This description, in fact, reflects the approach adopted in the bank audit. Banks have following facial features which distinguish them from the other commercial undertaking. तो उनके पास ये 5 यूनिक फीचर्स के टाइप के ट्रांजैक्शन होते हैं जिसकी वजह से हम बोलते हैं कि बैंकिंग सेक्टर इज अ डिफरेंट सेक्टर फ्रॉम द others. So all of you know that. They have custody of large volume of monetary items, including cash and negotiable instrument, physical security of which to be ensured. तो उनके पास monetary item means physical cash बहुत ज्यादा मात्रा में होता है, right? Or negotiable instrument like check, bills discounted, and something like that. There are very important documents. So उसकी custody, उसकी physical security should be taken into consideration. Bank therefore needs to establish a formal operating procedures, well-defined limits for the individual discretions, and well-organized system of internal control. So generally banking transaction के अंदर किसी को 100% freedom नहीं दी जा सकती कि आपको जिस तरीके से काम करना हो उस तरीके से कीजिए. There is a prescribed rules and regulation based on which the particular transaction should be carried out, and the bank officials have to follow that. They engage in large volume and variety of transaction in terms of both number and value. It is quite impossible for an auditor to get himself acquainted with the signature of all the account holder. He cannot gain any purpose by wasting the time on checking the transaction, which are more or less of the routine or repetitive nature. So generally बैंक के अंदर बहुत सारे ट्रांजेक्शन होते हैं, हर एक को देखने की जरूरत है, but there should be a random test checking should be there. They normally operate through the wide network of branches, which are geographically dispersed. This necessitates the greater decentralization of authority and disposal of the accounting and control functions. Therefore, it is quite difficult for a bank to have a uniform operating practices and accounting system, particularly when the branch handles the overseas transactions. So, अगर foreign में भी branch है बैंक की, तो फिर वो उसके rules और regulation के हिसाब से बनाएंगे. Lekin that what the auditor has to take into consideration ke how the banking operations are carried out and how the branch are functioning, which are far away from the head office. They are regulated by the government authorities, and the resultant regulatory requirements often influence the accountancy and auditing practices within the banking sectors. So if the banks are as it is regulated by the RBI, so there should not be often the influence on the accountancy or auditing practices, which should be reasonable, and it should not affect the objectives of the audit. Since the bank auditor is required to express his opinion on balance sheet items, he will draw his attention on the items advances. This is because the item advances is the major component of the assets. Let's underline it. Advances is the major component of the asset in the balance sheet. Hence, as stated supra, the statutory audit of the bank is often regarded as an audit of balance sheet, audit of advances, and system audit. Is it clear, dear students? समझ में आ रहा है?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Now, steps in banking, right? So I am just discussing it preliminary. So there are actually 5 steps in the bank audit. Like any other audit, the systematic approach to the audit of the banks and their branches would involve the following steps: preliminary work, that is the first work, then evaluation of the internal control system, preparation of the audit program, okay, how each and every banking operation which is carried out by the bank, what should be the audit program, how my engagement team will examine the operations and what kind of documentation they have. So preparation of audit program, execution of the audit work as per the audit program and as per the planning, right, and preparation and submission of the report. So that is what is the typically the steps in the bank audit, right? And that what is the explained over here. I'm not going to read it because it is very easy to understand. What is the preliminary work? Obviously the preliminary work means wherever the auditor is appointed an auditor of a bank, whether it is a company, whether the Companies Act is applicable, obviously the Banking Regulations Act rules will be applicable. So the auditor should be available of what are the different laws is applicable, make an understanding of it, take the knowledge of the banking operations which is carried out the branch where you are an auditor, कि जिस ब्रांच का मैं ऑडिटर हूँ, या तो मैं ब्रांच का ऑडिटर हो सकता हूँ या तो मैं पूरी बैंक का भी ऑडिटर हो सकता हूँ, तो कौन कौन से ट्रांजेक्शन operations बैंक ने किए हैं. If you take an example of Bajaj Finance, right? So Bajaj Finance is actually it's an NBFC. It's not a bank, but it is an NBFC. But अगर आप HDFC देखोगे, so it's a bank as well as bank as well as they are providing the advances for the consumer durable, which is the same business is done by the Bajaj Finance. So as an auditor, I have to need to understand where I am an auditor, which kind of banking operations they have done, whether they are providing a consumer durable loan, whether they are providing a personal loan, whether they are providing housing loan, whether they are providing a the term loan, or whether you are providing working capital loan, or which kind of operations they are, whether they are issuing the drafts, checks, right, or whether they are discounting the bills. So which kind of transaction? So acquire the knowledge of the economic activities which is carried out by the banks. So that is to be the preliminary, and obtain the documents. So in preliminary, you have to acquire the general understanding about the operation which is carried out by the bank, the constitutions of bank, whether the bank is, what are the bylaws, rules and regulations. You have to take all that, the income and expenditure, take the copy of last year's audit report, what are the comments of the previous auditor, and if you are an auditor of a main company and there are branches, whether the branch auditor has forwarded the adequate reports, and whether there is any observations or comments of the branch auditor, and then you also should take into consideration. Hello, any questions?
No, sir.
Yes. So this is what all about you to take. So take as far as possible all kinds of the information which is required for the performance of the audit, that is to be treated as a preliminary work or the step under the bank audit. Then obviously this is the most important, that the evaluation of the internal control system. We learn the entire standards on internal control, and if there is any deficiency in internal control system, that should be studied thoroughly, and based on that the materiality level should be set by the auditor. So it is very, very important that the auditor should obtain. So यहाँ पे भी reference है standards on auditing 200, overall objective of the independent auditor in conducting the audit in accordance. So it is very important which kind of internal control system the management has on it. So basically the following are the main principles of the internal controls in the bank, that is
या क्वेश्चन एग्जाम में कैसे पूछने वाले हो?
कौन सा? I'm not able to understand the questions. What the questions you have raised? Okay, so there is no feedback is coming anyway. So try to understand these all are repetitive in nature. ना आगे उसका दिया है वही है, right? So if they ask you what are the steps, if the question is asked in examination, what are the steps involved in bank audits, then you can write these 5 steps if the question is asked, right?
Sir.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
सर जो आगे जो टेबल फॉर्मेट में जो स्टेप्स दिए गए स्टेजेस वाइज 1 2 3 4 5 अगर वो करें तो भी चले ना?
I think, in my opinion, to be very honest, you write this only, right? Conducting a bank audit. Then you write this stage 1, 2, 3, because it is repetitive. यहाँ पे जो बातें हैं वही वहाँ पे बातें की गई है, right? So initial consideration है वहाँ पे preliminary work है,
Yes, sir.
right? Something like that. It is that, right? So this is the control. So second step is understanding the business operation, means it is including the internal control. Right, so वहाँ पे जो internal control की बात है वो यहाँ पे, right? So the step risk assessment, right? Execution. So risk assessment means you prepared वहाँ पे audit program लिखा हुआ है, audit planning करना पड़ेगा, उसके बारे में बात है. So this is an executions, right? And reporting. So in my opinion, you have to write here from only. That is more better. This is little bit, some paragraph form. It's given over here.
Yes,
Is
sir.
it clear? So it is repetitive in nature. So that's what I am leaving you to read by yourself. Am I right?
सर तो टेबल वाला लिखना है एग्जाम में.
मेरे हिसाब से वो लिखना पड़ेगा, लेकिन कोई ये लिखेगा तो मैं गलत नहीं दूंगा.
Okay, sir.
Am I clear to all of you?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Chalo, next. So all the 5 steps, then the audit report in case of nationalized bank. ये पढ़ना चाहिए थोड़ा, क्योंकि वो आगे नहीं दिया है, right? आगे के मटेरियल में वो नहीं दिया है इसलिए. So read this. In case of nationalized bank, the auditor is required to make a report to the central government in which he has to state. Actually, it is simple. Nothing wrong. The other than bank में जो डिपेंड होता है वही है यहाँ पे, लेकिन थोड़ा अलग तरीके से दिया है in respect to banks. So whether, in his opinion, the balance sheet is full and fair balance sheet containing all the necessary particulars and is drawn up so as to exhibit the true and fair affairs of the bank. And in case he has called for any information on expenditure, whether it has been given and whether it is satisfactory or not. तो audit report में लिखना पड़ेगा auditor को, whether or not the transaction of the bank which have come to his notice have been within the powers of the bank, whether or not the return received from the branches or offices of the bank have been found adequate for the purpose of his or her audit, whether the profit or loss account shows a true balance of profit or loss for the period covered by the account, and any other matter which he considered should be brought to the notice of the central government. So that audit is required to be provided. So this all information is provided other than banks, but here it is in relation to banks. But this is always is there in the audit report. So it is not new actually, right? Audit report in case of banking company. So if it is a banking company, the Companies Act 2013 will be applicable. So in the Companies Act 2013 में यही point है, A to E, the same A to E. So whether or not the information expense required by him or her have been found satisfactory or not, that is what is over here, whether all the information is satisfactory or not. Then whether or not the transaction of the company have been come to his notice are within the powers of the bank, the same points over here. And the same from the branches or the offices are adequate, whatever the return is found from that, and it is relevant, and the true profit or loss account shows the true and fair view of the profit or loss, and any other matter which is required to be considered. Now this is important because under the bank audit, long form audit report is there, right? So what is that? During the audit of the banks, an auditor often comes across the certain matter which may not be relevant or material directly for the sake of audit report. That is not important as far as the audit report is concerned. Notwithstanding, such matter should be communicated to the management of the bank under the audit. In such circumstances, the auditor, in addition to submitting their main audit report in accordance with the requirement of the applicable laws, also submit a report to the management, which is commonly known as a long form audit report. So as the audit report content is similar, like something like this, कि हमको ये ट्रू एंड फेयर व्यू दिखा रहा था, हमको जो भी इंफॉर्मेशन चाहिए थी वो मिल गई है, राइट, ट्रांजेक्शन सारे विद इन द पावर है, वो सब तो होता ही होता है, लेकिन मैनेजमेंट में आपको जब भी बैंक का जो ऑडिटर होता है उनको लॉन्ग फॉर्म ऑडिट रिपोर्ट भी देना होता है मैनेजमेंट को, so that the management would be able to understand that the banking operations are carried out effectively, right? So the Reserve Bank of India has directed all public sector banks, that means nationalized bank, State Bank of India and its subsidiary, private banks, foreign banks, to obtain a separate report. Now you also add the cooperative banks, because the cooperative banks also comes under the purview of the RBI, called a long form audit report in addition to the main audit report from their statutory auditor or auditors of a regional zonal offices dealing with the matter specified by the Reserve Bank of India. The long form audit report is to be furnished to the management and the copy thereof forwarded to the designated office of the Reserve Bank of India. So long form audit report बैंक को तो देना ही देना है, साथ साथ में आपके आरबीआई को भी भेजना पड़ेगा. The statutory auditor are expected to give the long form audit report. Yes.
Designated office क्या होता है?
Designated office means RBI की हर RBI actually their head office or corporate office is located in Mumbai, right? But in major cities of like Ahmedabad, like Calcutta, like Delhi, right? So there is the office of RBI. Even in Vadodara, there is an office of RBI. So that is to be treated as designated office of the RBI. So there are defined, these are the banks, and ये बैंक है उनको ये रीजन के अंदर आती है, तो उनको ये designated means prescribed, जिसको ये काम सौंपा गया. जैसे कि suppose your admission is in MCOM building, right? But if you need, after when you complete the graduation, and if you need suppose what you can call it, if you want to apply for foreign universities, and you require a certified testimony of your marks, then the designated office is the head office where it is certified. So exam section university का है, वो certified करके देगा, ना कि आपकी PG office आपको देगी. So that PG office is to be treated as the designated office for testimony to giving the testimony of the mark sheet which you have adopted. Transcript જેને આપણે કહીએ. Am I clear?
Yes, sir.
So something like that. Statutory auditor are expected to give a long form audit report along with the main report or with the short period thereafter. तो जब वो उठाते हैं तो long form audit report भी देना है. Unless there is a disagreement among the statutory auditor with regard to the long form audit report, they should jointly give a single long form audit report. For this, the individual audit program inter alia would have to clear the following: consideration of the comment and observation contained in the long form audit report of the branch auditor, and matter for which the statutory auditor concerned is directly responsible. तो जहाँ पे ब्रांच का ऑडिटर और दोनों अगर एग्री हो जाते हैं, ब्रांच ऑडिटर और हेड ऑफिस का जो ऑडिटर है वो दोनों एग्री हो जाते हैं, वो दोनों एक साथ अपना लॉन्ग फॉर्म ऑडिट रिपोर्ट दे सकते हैं अगर वो चाहे तो. नहीं चाहे तो दोनों अलग अलग भी दे सकते हैं. नथिंग रॉन्ग इन दैट. हाँ, बट जो हेड ऑफिस का ऑडिटर है, अगर ब्रांच ऑडिटर ने अपने लॉन्ग फॉर्म ऑडिट रिपोर्ट में कोई कमेंट डाली है और इट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, देन ऑब्वियसली द हेड ऑफिस ऑडिटर हैज टू इनकॉर्पोरेट इन हिज लॉन्ग फॉर्म ऑडिट रिपोर्ट दैट पर्टिकुलर मैटर. इज इट क्लियर बच्चों, समझ में आ रहा है?
Yes,
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. So from this your syllabus gets over. From this onwards it's not in your syllabus. You need an audit procedure for verification of asset and liabilities is not in your syllabus. तो यहाँ से कुछ भी नहीं पढ़ना है, इस टॉपिक से निकाल देना, राइट? क्योंकि ये आप इसलिए मटेरियल दिख रहा ज्यादा होगा लेकिन उतना है नहीं. ये सब कुछ भी नहीं है.
सर कौन से पेज तक रिमूव कर दिए अपन ये
यहाँ तक 475 तक.
475.
ये यहाँ तक निकाल दो. ठीक है. ये जो फॉर्मेट दिया हुआ ना बैलेंस शीट का, फॉर्म ऑफ बैलेंस शीट, ये कुछ भी नहीं. कहां से? यहां से. सो विच दिस पेज नंबर इज 463. कितने सारे पेजेस निकाल दे? अब तो सिलेबस कम हो गया ना.
હવે આઈએમપી આપી દો સર.
माय गॉड.
हाँ सर.
हाँ सर,
हाँ
IMP
सर,
आपो यार.
સર ઘણું વધારે છે સર આઈએમપી નો બૂસ્ટર ડોઝ જરૂરી છે યુનિટ 3 અને 4 માં.
જો હવે હું તમને
1 2 માં
હવે શાંતિથી સાંભળો.
ઓકે.
યુનિટ નંબર 3. યુનિટ નંબર 3 તમારી પાસે છે. એમાં ટોપિક જ કેટલા છે? એમાં ટોપિકમાં એક તો બેંક્સ છે. तो बैंक ની અંદર मैक्सिमम लीगल फ्रेमवर्क, राइट. और तो इसमें उतना ही है, ये 15 मार्क्स में आ नहीं सकता. और पहले मैं आपको ऐसा बता देता हूं कि पेपर स्टाइल क्या है. क्वेश्चन नंबर 3 15 और 15, क्वेश्चन नंबर 4 15 और 15. So straight away there will be a 15 marks questions, right? And you have to write.
So what about repetition? ध्यान रखना.
है ना, right? फिर whatever is mentioned in the material you have to write in examinations, right? Now what are the topics? First is the bank. So banking में से एक 15 mark का question. So in that there are 3 questions. That is the legal framework first, and then conducting an audit. The second point. There are 2 topics is only there into that. Then there's a third topic is the internal control procedure. So 3 में से कोई भी एक 15 मार्क का आ जाए शायद, पता नहीं, right? और बाकी तो रिपीटेटिव इन नेचर है, चाहे ऊपर का लिखो या नीचे का लिखो. अगर कोई भी क्वेश्चन आता है, आई वुड प्रेफर दैट कि आपको पहले ही आगे का दिया है वही लिखना चाहिए, बिकॉज इट इज मोर लॉजिकल, मोर सेंसिबल. बट इफ इट इज डिफिकल्ट टू डाइजेस्ट एंड रिमेंबर, those who are not able to write of the above all this, you can write which is given over here in the question of, right? So conducting of a bank audit, तो आप ये भी लिख सकते हो. Is it clear? So there is one questions can be from that. बाकी ये सब तो लिखना नहीं है. Second,
सर अगर हमको ये
पहले मेरे को सुन लो, उसके बाद क्वेश्चन पूछो. Right? Let me stop the recording, huh? Because I don't would like to, you know.
जी आया.